Today I want to talk about a new project that I've been working on, and it's to create a projectional structured editor. So a while back I worked on a tool called RLiterate, which was a literate programming tool. So you wrote a document which had code snippets embedded in the document, and you could kind of describe your program as a book and explain all the pieces of code in there, but the focus was to kind of create a document describing the program instead of just having the code. And the text that you see here is not actually a text component, it's rendering the text using like graphic primitives, like drawing text. And when working on that problem, I also had to work on the problem like how do you write an editor? How do you present, or how do you project like a text string to the display and allowing the user to type characters on the keyboard, and that has some effect on the underlying document. So in RLiterate, this projection is kind of a mix of sometimes rendering the text with like graphic primitives and sometimes using WX widgets for some type of widgets. But when I worked on this problem, I also came across another project called Projectured. Projectured is a general purpose projectional editor. So I think it's a framework for implementing projectional editing. So you have some kind of document, maybe a JSON document or like source code in a programming language, and then you transform that text or JSON representation or whatever it is further and further and further until you have something that can be presented on the screen. So somehow transforming like a JSON document to graphic primitives that can be printed on the screen, and then working all the way back. So when you have some input, like you press a key on the keyboard, it will project that in the other direction, so ultimately affecting the JSON document or whatever you're editing. And when I came across Projectured, I thought that this would be a good model to try out in RLiterate, but RLiterate was already using a very different architecture, so it was hard to fit in. I also tried reading the source code for Projectured, but it's written in some version of Lisp, and it was quite difficult for me to comprehend. So I thought, why not try to implement something like Projectured, like use the concept of Projectured, and try to implement that myself, to mostly to understand how this style of editor can work, and see if I can make something useful. So that's what I would like to demo now, what I've got. It's just a start, it's not much, but just like to show you. First of all, I would like to show you what RLProject looks like right now. So when we start RLProject, the editor is presented with a default document, and the document we're editing now is the hello world string, and it has a selection where the two L's in hello are selected and the cursor blinks at the first L. You can also see the first line is a status line showing us what character we just typed on the keyboard. So if I press J, for example, the status will change to J, and the string and the selection is also changed to insert a J character. And I can type more characters to modify the string. So let's have a look at the code, how this editor is created. So it's done here in the code. This is what creates the document that is being edited. So the innermost document here is a string, the string hello world, and the twos here are, the first two is that the selection started at position 2, and the second one here is the length of the selection. So that's the two L's being selected. So this is the innermost data structure that we're editing, and the editor must present this string in some way, like project it to a visual representation, and then also handle keyboard inputs and mouse inputs to make some modifications to that data structure. So this string to terminal text is a projection which turns a string into a terminal text representation. So terminal text is a data structure representing something that could be printed to a terminal. So in this case, it's a list of strings with different formatting and different positions. Finally, we wrap that string to terminal text in an editor, and the editor adds this status line to the terminal text. So the editor can work with any terminal text here, it doesn't matter. The only thing it does is that it adds this status line. So let's have a look at how these things are implemented a little bit. So let's first look at the string. So string just has the string itself, the selection start and the selection length. And it has a replace function to make modifications to the string. And the replace function replaces the current selection with the text that we pass to it. Next, let's look at string to terminal text. Actually, let's first look at terminal text. Where is it? It's here. So terminal text is a cursor position and a list of strings. And the strings in this case is the terminal text fragment. So probably this should be called text fragments or something. And a text fragment is some text at a given position and then some styling attributes, like if it should be bold in the background and the foreground. And let's go back to string to terminal text. So string to terminal text is a projection that turns a string data structure into a terminal text data structure. And terminal text is actually something that can be rendered to the screen. A string cannot be rendered, it's just data. And so this projection provides one way to show a string on screen. So it does this currently by creating 3 text fragments from the string. So the first one is everything before the selection, the second one is the selection, and the third one is everything after the selection. And you can see here that the selection itself is rendered with a yellow background color. So if we restart, you can see that the 2 L's are rendered with yellow background. That's coming from here. And finally, let's have a look at the canvas. The editor. So the editor is also a projection which takes any kind of terminal text and returns a new kind of terminal text where we add a string, we add a text fragment, and that text fragment is the status line, and down here all the text fragments from the terminal text passed into the editor are included, but they are also moved 1 line down. So if we don't do this, say dy0 for example, the status line and hello world will be rendered on the same line, so it would look weird like that. And we can also move it two lines down, and then the text will be rendered 2 lines down. And we didn't fix the cursor position, we just moved that 1 line down. Yeah, so they have to match. But yeah, that's kind of how this works. So I'm still trying to figure out how to structure all the classes and how the objects should interact with each other to solve this problem in a generic way. But this is a prototype where I can actually do that and actually see if it works and what kinds of problems certain designs and certain architectures lead to. I'm not sure that projectional editing or structured editing is better than text editing. I believe there have been many attempts to implement this, but it never got quite successful. But I'm still interested in exploring what's possible with such an editor. Is it possible to make an editor which is useful for me in some context, that is actually better than a plain text editor? And I'm also interested in like the implementation technique of a general purpose projectional editor. So how do you do it? How do you implement such a thing? And so that's what I'm trying to explore with the RL project, and we'll see what happens. Until next time,